afternoon, almost good evening, and welcome. My name is Thal, and I'm the global editor of Reuters Breaking News. Welcome to this session about where we are with emerging markets. This, I think, is the last panel of Tuesday at Davos, and I think you'll all agree we've saved the best for last. I've got a very distinguished group here to talk about emerging markets with us. So just going in order from my left, we have Prime Minister James Hame Marape. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly, from the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea. We have Rania Al-Mashat, Minister of Planning, Economic Development and International Cooperation of Egypt. Next to her, Makhtar Diop, the Managing Director of the IFC in Washington. And at the end, Bob Sternfels, Global Managing Partner of the McKinsey & Company. So, we've got a lot to talk about, so we're going to get going. There'll be some opportunity at the end for you to ask some questions, so think about what you want to say. Just before we get into the discussion, I do just want to point to some interesting statistics, to frame the conversation, courtesy of the World Economic Forum's Chief Economist Outlook, which you can see on the screen here. The World Economic Forum asked various chief economists to provide their views on growth and inflation for various parts of the world. We all know, obviously, that economic forecasts are an art, not a science, so take that and bear that in mind. But for what it's worth, it's interesting to me that South Asia stands out as the region where the people expect the strongest growth this year, 45% strong growth. East Asia and Pacific also strong. Middle East and North Africa next. The US has improved a lot compared to what people expected last year. And Europe's growth outlook is the weakest of the group, which will probably be no surprise to people who spend time at the World Economic Forum. But let's focus on emerging markets. I must just say there is often the complaint, and I anticipate it now, that emerging markets is a catch-all phrase, which is useful for investors in New York and London, but maybe not so useful when you're trying to generalize about different countries in different parts of the world with different circumstances. But let's try and tease out some of the commonalities and also some of the differences with our panel. So, Prime Minister, if I can start with you. One of the things that strikes me looking at those numbers, actually, especially compared to last year when I think you were also here, is how relatively optimistic people are about growth. And if you think about everything that's happened in the world in the last year, trade wars and various other disruptions, that sort of resilience is quite interesting. I just wonder how your country has managed to sort of navigate in this uncertain environment.
Well, Peter, thank you. And I want to say thank you for World Economic Forum for giving an opportunity to Papua New Guinea as part of the emerging market to have a conversation. Papua New Guinea is placed in the middle of East and West. We've always been, culturally, we have affinity with the Eastern economies and Eastern countries by education, by democracy, by government upbringing. We are part of the Western economy. We try our best to walk the fine line. We are friends to all, enemies to none. We placed in the Southeast Asian sort of economy space. We have coexistence with Southeast Asia. We are a Pacific Island nation. We also are a strong member of APEC. We have a fine balance in how we relate as an emerging economy. The last 5 years of the COVID, we have posted about 4% growth consistently, and diversifying away from our traditional sort of anchor economy area in mining and petroleum and shifting to the non-resource sector of economy. So posting above 4% growth historically for the first time, 5 consecutive years, and also inflation contained below our running average the last 50 years we've been a country. So emerging markets where fresh capitals are. Capitals knows no boundaries, in my view, in this day and age where capital can flow everywhere. Doesn't matter what someone else tries to do in some place. Capital will know no boundary. Trade will keep on flowing. And if one part of the world tries to squeeze trade or maintain its own focus, capital will flow elsewhere. Southeast Asia, South Asia, Asia is the economic combustion. The next 50 years, in my view, PNG is placed right in the heart of Southeast Asia, Asia, and we're working with the Asian marketplace, as well as anchoring on our traditional partners. We have PNG right now has two of the biggest oil and gas companies, Thal and ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil operated our biggest LNG project since 2008. First gas 2014. It was 70% bank financed by 19 global banks all over the world. We retired our full bank finance 6 months earlier. And so emerging markets, in my view, has fresh capitals. Doesn't matter where you invest. Investors want a good return on investment. My view is emerging markets have ability to return better to investors because fresh capital, fresh money knows no boundary.
Okay, well, we'll pick up on the capital flows point a bit later on as well. Maybe, Minister, if I can just turn to you. I mean, one of the buzzwords that I'm hearing a lot in Davos this year is resilience, and I think McKinsey's done some work on this as well, which we can talk a bit. But I suppose when the external environment is so sort of unpredictable and volatile, it's probably all the more important that you try to sort of deal with the things you can at home. So what has your government sort of been focusing on in terms of trying to improve resilience, I suppose?
Well, thank you very much. I think one of the key features for emerging markets or any country that wants to create that resilience is to keep on reforming. And not to sit back and be happy with a growth number or an FDI number, but continue reforming to create that resilience against shocks. And I give the case of Egypt in March 24. We went through a very important reform process on the monetary side, the fiscal side, structural reforms. So fast forward, despite the war in the region, despite Suez Canal not bringing in revenues, we have grown by 5.5% almost. And that comes from manufacturing, it comes from ICT, it comes from tourism. So all the reforms that took place, structural reforms that opened up the possibilities and the potential for the economy are actually providing dividends now. So you know, I think COVID has taught us that, and McKinsey at the time came out with a paper, and there was a whole working group on resilience, but really, exogenous shocks will always be there. Sometimes favorable, sometimes unfavorable. But really what matters is countries looking at themselves, trying to ease business, trying to push private sector engagement, trying to engage with different IFIs to avail financing, not for the sovereign, but also for the private sector. Tap on the different tools of finance. Make sure that your debt management is under control, that you're trying to figure out what to do with your bilateral and multilateral partners. So I think that's what we have been able to do. But the unfortunate reality is there's no ceiling for reform. It's continuous. So there should not be a reform fatigue, because the world we're living in today is one that you have to keep on pushing the frontier, make these reforms as transparent as possible. And I think what is needed most now is that all these reforms have to have a human element, so that people are with you in this process and are able to see what the benefits are for them. And here, people include citizens, private sector, and also whether regional, regional partners or global partners.
Yeah, Bob, if I can just come to you, just to pick up on that point about resilience. McKinsey's done some work on this, and obviously work with a lot of governments on it. Can you just give maybe some bullet points in terms of what have you sort of found in terms of the sort of the priorities in that area?
Sure, and I might just say one comment. First, Peter, on your opening about emerging markets, and would agree with you. Often there's a lot of heterogeneity there. Yeah. I'll tell you, internally, at least within McKinsey, we operate within over 70 countries. We've actually changed the term, and we use the term frontier markets, and it's not the frontier as the physical frontier, it's the innovation frontier. And what we're now finding is that there has been reverse IP exchange within our firm from these frontier markets to more mature markets, because there's the potential to leapfrog and do things differently. And perhaps we'll come back to that. But I wanted to actually put this idea that it's not emerging, it's actually being at the frontier of innovation. And is there a potential to really leapfrog in some of the markets that are growing more quickly? And we can perhaps come back to that. But I'll go to your question on resilience. And we were, I think, at the inception of the Resilience Consortium. And this was right around COVID. And when we got together, we thought, okay, this will be resilience for one thing, for the pandemic. Right. Boy, were we wrong. And what we learned through this process is that resilience is something that is a competitive asset. And it's a competitive asset at multiple levels. It's a competitive asset at the country level. It's a competitive asset at the enterprise level and at the individual level. We've done a whole bunch of research on this, but I would highlight maybe just three simple things to think about when we think about the concept of resilience. The first, and you were alluding to this, but it's like a muscle. If you don't exercise it, it can atrophy. And so it's not a set of things that you put in place once, but it's something that you need to keep coming back to. And what I often tell leaders of an enterprise, whether it's public or private, do you know how resilient your organization is? And how are you measuring this? And are you getting more or less resilient each year? Are you building muscle or are you losing muscle? The one thought resilience is a muscle. The second is many think about resilience as the ability to withstand shock. Can I withstand the next unpredictable thing? And it's interesting, when you get at true resilience, and I like sports, and so I'll use a sports analogy. Truly resilient organizations, whether they're public or private, have the ability to play offense and defense at the same time. So there is defensive steps. Do I have buffer? Have I built the ability to withstand something that I don't foresee coming? The problem, if you only focus on that, is you will survive, but you will be no different than your peer group. You'll come out average. The offensive side says, often in times of disruption, there are unique opportunities, but you have to look for them. There might not be opportunities to leapfrog. There might be opportunities for economic growth, for new capital formation. The problem there is if you only play offense, you might come out disproportionately ahead, but you might also blow yourself up. And so then one of the key questions for resilient enterprise is, are you in balance? Do you have both defensive steps and offensive steps at the same time? So the second idea, offense and defense. And then the last one gets at the individual level. And we had just started this, I remember, in our first work around resilience. But there's an idea of personal resilience. And so how are we building skills in individuals to be able to get back up when you get knocked down? And this is becoming an increasingly important attribute for leadership. And so as you think about leading in either a public sector context or a private sector context, are we building resilience in the individual, not just in the organization level?
Okay, thank you. I just want to come back to the sporting analogy, Makhtar, because obviously, as we were just hearing, you were at the final of the African Cup of Nations the other day, on supporting the winning side. But just to pick up on the sort of the capital question, we've seen, obviously, particularly in the last year, very significant flows of capital into emerging markets, all shapes and sizes of emerging markets, even some areas which have sort of previously been off limits to sort of private investors. I mean, your institution, the sort of, this can have good and bad sides. How do you sort of think about what the sort of capital picture at the moment and what role you're playing in that?
No, thank you very much. I think, yes, I'm proud that my country won the African Cup, so I have to, sorry, yeah, so that,
we'll have another chance.
You need to have a winner sometime, No, I think that, taking the analogy of sport also, is that resilience has a long-time dimension.
Yes.
Okay. You are resilient because you want to be here in the long run. You're playing defense because you don't want to fall or not be able to rise. You're playing offense because you want to be able to reach a goal that nobody has reached. So I think that temporality is a dimension is very important to emphasize. And I think that links very much what you said, because when you don't have that element of duration, you don't see the need to reform. You just say, why should I reform? If I'm a politician, why should I take this political cost? Because I just want to survive to the next couple of years. But if you are able to build that resilience in your society through the individual and have a social contract which is strong enough, which allows you to have this long-term perspective, you can align all these elements. And it's a little bit the way I see it, because you are able to have reforms that you understand you can pace, because one of the challenge, and she lives it every day, is pacing the reform. Is it too fast? Is it too slow? Is it the right time? Is it not? And this is an art, because it's not something that you learn in textbook. And that is fundamentally giving the confidence and the resilience for the private sector to invest and to mobilize capital on long term. So I think I just wanted to make that element in. The second one is we are looking at source of capital. Where is the capital now coming? I think that we have different opportunities now that you need. We had a meeting recently with all the pension funds in Africa. If I take the largest pension fund in Africa, it's South Africa. They still have a possibility of going up to 30+% of cross-border investment, but they're still doing 5% or 7%, which means that there is a lot of long-term capital sitting in the African continent, which is not used for productive sector. Why? And that's the question where we need to look at it, and not only to think about FDIs, because FDI is an important element for sure. We continue doing what we are doing for FDIs, but let's think about what is also the savings that are in the continent that are not channeled in productive sectors. And I think that the institutional investors need to have their long-term visibility, resilience, to be able to put the money of the pensioners or others in long-term infrastructure investment. And I think this is where we are currently in some of the emerging countries. I'm taking Africa, but that's also the same situation as what it can bring to as a reform. I was running at the House of Ukraine. It is not an emerging country, but you have some features which are quite interesting to look at when you think about emerging countries. The big question is that now with the reconstruction, how will we be? They had a lot of state-owned enterprises, so we need to improve their governance. So we need to build the stock market. So this is a kind of lesson that we can bring not only in emerging market, but also in countries which will be facing an accelerating reconstruction. And we have a set of countries now which will be coming to a new phase of reconstruction, being Gaza, being other countries, where will you have those type of, and I think the key will be to ensure that people understand that it's not a remake of the past, but as you said, they are taking all the innovation, being financial engineering, non-financial, non-banking institutions in the financial sector, all these kind of things that emerge, is the digital, etc. Put it together and think about. So it's not an exact question that I usually IFC ask, but it's a little bit the way I think. So that's the reason why they ask me which sector are you looking at. I look at all these sectors which can help me to build that resilience around. And the last thing is that tomorrow there is a breakfast with an Africa Free Trade Agreement. The discussion will be a lot on infrastructure, and I keep on saying it's infrastructure, but it's also policies. Because we are today working on the Lopito corridor, which will be helping moving a lot of critical minerals and build around that an ecosystem for manufacturing. The main obstacle is that when people come to the border of a country, the wagon are staying there for a week before being able to move to the next countries. So this is a kind of question that, as we look at the resilience, rebuilding the supply chains, the regional supply chains, and those kind of questions that we are looking. And lastly, skills. Skills, because the main topic that everybody is facing right now is jobs. So if you don't address this issue of jobs, that social contract that you want to build is allow you to have a long-term perspective will be in jeopardy.
Yeah, well, that's not just an emerging market question, so I don't think everybody's aware. But Prime Minister, just we were, if I'm not without betraying any confidences, that we were talking in the room next door just earlier, and you were telling me about, just pick up on that leapfrog idea. You were talking about one of the things you're sort of trying to find out here is what you can do in terms of technology to leapfrog and sort of improve things in your country. Can you just talk a bit more about what you're thinking there and how that might work?
Yeah, thanks. And on the idea of emerging market or the frontier markets, they have the fullest potential in front of them, or if not, the converse of potential. So no one knows exactly where the boundary of that space is.
Right.
So that is for investment community, you have to assess which economy has that range, a great range of movement. And for emerging economies like PNG, coming from behind, we want to find the best capacity, best technology, best ICT platform, best AI platform, and participate in this digital economy that will make us almost bypass many of the downsides and find the best and go out for. I was just telling you in the waiting room, we are shopping for the best AI available to cut out public service inefficiency, assist our regulatory process move much faster. We deal with large-scale foreign investors, ExxonMobils, the Totals, the Barricks, the Newmonts, the Syngins. All the majors are in our economy. We just need to get the efficiency of the system to make sure we are compatible. And I think technology allows the emerging markets to also cross borders in the way that they do business. The digital economy platform gives them the ability to move miles. So a lot of possibility in the emerging markets. You do not know where the maximum throttle is. Many of the existing mature markets, they possibly reach the maximum throttles, and they're trying to diversify. The emerging markets have unpredictability in them. It's just about investors finding the right place to get inside to maximize their return on investments. And I always advocate for Southeast Asia. I feel Southeast Asia is a place to look into, including Papua New Guinea.
Okay. Well, Bob, just coming back to that, because you sort of raised this idea of being able to sort of the sort of reverse flows of insight and lessons. Do you sort of recognize that? Is there a sense that there are some countries that have, might historically have been looked at as sort of less advanced, which will become almost sort of testing grounds for or places where new technology gets implemented and proven?
Look, this is why I'm much more in the optimist camp than the pessimist camp. And when you think about some of the dynamics across markets that have this leapfrog potential, which is why I keep coming back to being at the frontier edge of innovation, you find youth, which is an enormous challenge, but it's also one of the most privileged assets. And you find an opportunity not to be encumbered by legacy assets. And I would completely agree, if you can find the right policy framework, there are ways to develop that do not follow how more mature markets did. So one of the topics that I know we'll get into is infrastructure. Right? And if you think about infrastructure development, particularly say in the US and Europe, and you look at kind of 4 core pillars, they were all developed separately. Right? Transportation, water, electricity, and connectivity. Right? Those are 4 different infrastructure systems developed by different players at different points in time. If you're starting more de novo, greenfield, you can go for all 4 at the same time. Now you need the right policies with right-of-way, etc. But you think from a virgin design point of view, if I am going to get right-of-way access, why don't I solve all 4 of these simultaneously? Putting in place a transport provides me the right-of-way for fiber, provides me the right-of-way for grid modernization, and provides me the right-of-way for water distribution. The synergies around that are a quantum of developing 4 different systems at different points in time. That is a real example of leapfrog potential. But it does require the right framework to be able to enable this.
We call it big ones.
Yes.
Big ones. When I was in infrastructure,
Call it what?
big ones.
Big ones.
Big
right.
ones.
Yeah, right.
Instead of having to. But I think that there is something that I would like just to mention, is that to do a little bit what we say. Your report, which was a brilliant report on resilience, was asking us, you MDB, what are you doing differently? So one of the things that we are doing now more, and we'll be doing, is more equity. Because that innovation, that mobilization of additional resource, it requires more equity for firms in emerging market. Across the emerging market, there are not enough equity. So we will be bringing much more equity, IFC, in our, and that's an important pillar. Secondly, we are focusing a lot on MSMEs. We would like to make sure that we are creating that network of MSMEs that will be able to create jobs.
Can you just explain what that is?
MSMEs, medium and small.
Medium, small enterprise.
Okay. Yeah.
So that will be something that will be. The third one is to multiply the sources of mobilization. In the past, we were using our balance sheet to finance everything. Now, actually, our idea is to use our name, our expertise, and as little as possible of our own resources to mobilize as much as we can from the capital market. That's really, so we are inverting totally the paradigm. So our name, our expertise, the quality of our balance sheet can attract a lot of people. Fourth, multiplying the instrument for de-risking. First loss. We have put all the guarantee business of the World Bank Group in the one umbrella, MIGA, because that's why the private sector is asking us. Guarantees, de-risking. Fifth, we're doing more of local currency, because we realize also that when looking at the resilience of companies in emerging market, particularly when there is a lot of volatility on the exchange rate, this is local currency. So we are today doing 1/3 of our lending in local currency, and we want to grow up. And the last point is to develop and deepen the capital market. That's something that we are looking at with all instruments possible. And lastly, to think about financing not only through the traditional banking system, but to look at as a non-banking institutions, which are today can access a lot of this segment in a much more efficient and much faster way, and ready to take the risk. So operationally, that's the way we are trying to respond to all this. And, it has worked. We have moved from 4 years ago, 32 billion to 72 billion this last year. And to wood, we might be doing 92 billion. But all this is mobilization. We are mobilizing more and more resources in the capital market.
Yeah, and you want more private capital sort of coming in as a result of that. So Minister, maybe just come back to you. On that capital point, I mean, there's good capital and bad capital, and sometimes it comes in, and sometimes it goes out. So you have to sort of be thoughtful about how you prepare for it. I just wonder, from the point of view of a recipient of external capital, how do you think about that? How do you manage it?
Yeah, well, first I want to just applaud Makhtar, because what he's doing at IFC is actually fantastic for emerging economies. We are a country that benefits tremendously from all the innovation that's happening with respect to the financing on the infrastructure. Our renewable, complete plan is based on private sector getting concessional finance, getting guarantees from MIGA, getting blended with grants from other partners. So we have a very successful financing for infrastructure in Egypt, which is again based on partnership and credibility with our partners globally. And this is happening in both mitigation aspects, if we're putting a climate or smart investment angle to it. So on renewables, wind, green hydrogen, but also on adaptation when it comes to water waste management and so forth. So there's, that type of financing which is directed to private sector, more long-term, sometimes philanthropy comes in, so there's patient capital as well. All of this is taking place. And again, it's all for growth and jobs. So this is very, very important. And then it paves the way for more tradables, more manufacturing and so forth. You mentioned the African Free Trade Agreement. In Egypt, we also invested so much in ports and so forth to actually pave the way for manufacturing and opening up with the continent. But I want to go a little bit to what Bob mentioned on frontier markets. And we have during COVID, the slogan was "Leave no one behind." With the technology revolution that's happening now, and it's a different type of revolution. It's not the internet. It's more R&D. It's more AI in different ways. It's not countries that are users and countries that are producers. So we're very worried that we will leave countries behind. And while we are talking about the importance of investing in infrastructure and pushing more skills and so forth, there's an element which is not being discussed, and how countries which are not very much into the AI, not as users, but in the AI space, what is the convergence going to look like, and how long will that take? And we need to have a little bit of a discussion with the World Bank and with others. How, even IMF programs do not have an AI diagnostic, for instance. So I just, what Bob mentioned in terms of classifying economies that are going to attract capital are the ones that have AI, then this should worry countries that we are talking about. So this is I think one of the key takeaways from Davos this time, because the risks are geopolitics. Okay, so we know that space. The second is protectionism that creates some opportunities for countries. Others are going to suffer. And then the third is AI, and how are we going to classify countries? And in the past, convergence used to be about growth and equality and so forth. Now, convergence is going to take longer if there continues to be this disparity between countries on AI, users versus producers, the chips. Africa should be a fantastic, we have all the rare earth materials and so forth, but are we using it in a way that makes us frontier countries?
You're so right, Rania. And I think that we, today Africa or low-income countries are not necessarily ready to have the processing power that you have in SME. But they have something that is underutilized. If you see the area which are growing in application is biotech, precision medicine. And those is based on genomics. Yes. And I think one of the things, if I were to encourage a country, do the maximum you can to have an idea of what is your genetic pool, what is available to you, what is the richness of biodiversity, sequence it, keep it, because that's a lot of money that will be coming from that. Even if you cannot process it, this is a lot of money, because actually we all know that a lot of the medicine which is done today is done on the genomics of people, one race or one ethnic group. And a lot of other people are not really sequenced properly, and therefore are not able to have the medicine, precision medicine which is needed. So I would really suggest that even collecting the data and have the privacy, the policy to have control of this data would be very important, because you can put it as an asset when you're discussing with people who have a bigger processing power than you have.
So I just want to ask Bob, how do we classify this type of resilience? Because it's very different. It makes me wonder, a year from now, if these countries are not in the discussion, where are we going to be? And we're talking about migration now as a problem. Imagine later on if these countries are left behind.
Look, I think it's a great topic to unpack, and I think the thinking is still, given how fast AI is rolling out, I think it's still nascent. And where I go is, it's pretty clear to me the economic potential associated with AI. It's not linear to get there. It's going to be harder than people think, but the potential is massive. I think the really interesting question you raise is, how inclusive is this potential going to be?
Yes.
Right? Is it going to be exclusive or inclusive? And I would say it's worth thinking through. Every country needs to think through what's their AI strategy. Right? What are the unique assets they bring? Often it's data sets, to your point. And how do you then think about establishing sovereignty around these data sets? And then figuring out how to best monetize those data sets. I also think it's very interesting, and it's not all that talked about, but look, in this race, there are two very different philosophies that are emerging. There is a US philosophy, which is more of a closed source system. There's a Chinese philosophy, which is much more of an open source system. And when we look at venture firms backing startups outside of the US, the vast majority run on Chinese models. Why? Because it's more open source. The costs are lower. It allows you to build on top of that. And so I think there's also a fascinating question as we think about this inclusion, not solely to look at the West, but to actually see how is this playing out in terms of different approaches in building these models, and does that allow for opportunities for new entrepreneurial companies in frontier markets?
It's really interesting, and definitely, yeah, there's a whole sort of literature around the diffusion of new technologies and stuff, and I think really relevant for your perspective on that. I'm just conscious we're sort of almost running low on time, but I want to give people in the room an opportunity to have a say. So we're going to use very advanced digital technology, which is you take the digits in your hand and you put them in the air, and then you can ask your question. So anyone got a question for the panel? This gentleman here.
So hello, it was a great panel. So my name is Javier Lozano. I'm co-founder of Clínicas del Azúcar, or Sugar Clinics. It's the largest network of diabetes care clinics in Mexico. So one of my question is, we've been approached from people from Egypt about how we can replicate the model, and then from Peru, so it seems that every emerging market country is trying to solve the same problems. And like for me, diabetes, like we have probably the largest unique database of people. So how we can use it to create a solution for Egypt, for Peru, for India. So do you see a way that, from the work that you're doing, or even from McKinsey perspective, it's, how we can work together for specific challenges or social problems that we can solve together, so we don't have to invest in every country to develop every solution, but how we can make more global solutions for that?
Okay, thank you. I think probably starting with you.
Yeah.
No, I mean, this is exactly what the World Bank group has started a big internal reform, and we are created our president have created what we call the Knowledge Bank, and the Knowledge Bank has two pillars. One is policy, what are the right policies and how we can learn from the policy of each countries. So the one is the replicability. Sometimes one of the criticisms that was made in IFIs is that we have a nice idea, but it's pilot or it remains at a small scale, it works somewhere else, but maybe on the replicability of it, we haven't had maybe the mechanism in place to replicate. So a lot of what we will be doing is what Ajay call stealing shamelessly, okay? So steal what works somewhere, shamelessly put it somewhere else. If you think about it, that's why the private sector is working. The private sector think an idea, it works in one country, and so IFIs and the World Bank Group is more and more moving that direction, to working like the private sector is doing. Something is working well here, why cannot be replicating it in it? Diabetes, this is a problem in Mexico, this is a problem in Sub-Saharan Africa, this is a problem in the Middle East, this is a problem everywhere now. Diabetes. If you have a solution which works in Mexico and which is adapted to the condition of frontier markets, I'm sure that Rania would be delighted to see, and our job would be IFC to help and finance. If there is an Egyptian want to partner with you, doesn't have enough equity, our job is to mobilize that equity for that person to do that investment. What I suggest is that to do it as a joint venture, because it's always better than doing it just as a, and I think that was maybe a lesson also of some of the FDI in some countries in the past, not to think enough about joint venture. But joint venture with a local investor is a key to success and sustainability.
Okay, well, maybe you can work out the deal after this. Just one final question here.
Amazing.
Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, my name is Daniel. Earlier last year, I had the opportunity of being the U.S. youth delegate to the G20, where we spoke on AI and what the youth really see across 21 members of the G20 Asian member countries. And one of the things that we talked about most that never really got spoken to the floor, but I think is particularly relevant for this conversation with emerging markets or frontier markets, is this idea of AI sovereignty and how, at the risk of not continuing to exacerbate the gap between global north and global south, right? How we can build models that actually work. Because right now, I think we're at a point where hyperscalers are kind of reaching every corner of Earth, and the tech that you use at 5 is the same tech you use at 50. So I'm kind of very keen to hear from all of you guys in leadership of how you're approaching this for all of your nations.
Okay, we've got limited time, but do you want to start? Bob?
Just maybe one thought, and then we could get a country specific. But the reason I kind of come back to more hopefulness on this inclusive aspect of AI, because this is another version of that, is things are changing really fast, right? And if you look at the efficacy of small language models versus large language models and what has happened just in the last 6 months, right? You've seen a massive jump in the efficacy of small language models, now getting close to 90% of the efficacy of leading edge large language models at 1/1000th the capital intensity, right? And where does that curve go, right? Where does it go in the next 12 months, et cetera? And I don't think anyone truly knows the shape of these curves, because I think we were all surprised at the improvement in the efficacy of the small language models. The reason I'm highlighting this is the small language models don't require the capital that you read about in the headlines for some of the Western hyperscalers. And I think it gives, when you start to then think about domain specific, so rather than universal, let's take healthcare. Let's actually marry it with a unique data set. We may not need the leading edge LLM. We might actually be able to develop a custom small language model. That bundle could actually work in a frontier market.
Yeah. Can I, maybe just in the last 2 minutes we have, Prime Minister, you want your perspective on that?
My response to this one, governments and sovereign nations have their own self-interest. I think in this day and age, private sector can drive common good across borders. And there's a need for multilateral organizations like WTO, ILO, WEF, etc., to find a common rule book for all. And private sector can lead in this space. When countries have their own self-interest, private sector knows no self-interest. And lessons learned from one economy could be moved to another in a borderless ICT world.
2 very quick comments, just echoing Bob's optimism. Despite protectionism that we saw last year, growth is very robust. Inflation is down. It's because of technology. So there is, one way to face all these external shocks on our livelihood is through technology. The second point, and this is more maybe philosophical, goes back to the Prime Minister's point, defining global public goods. There's a big debate that the I mean, every international communique that comes out says global public good, but we don't have an exact definition in terms of parameters of these global public goods. So that goes back to your point, and maybe that's for another panel.
Well, we can definitely end there. Thank you very much, the panel, for all your contributions. Thank you all for listening and for your questions. And yeah, I hope we'll leave it there and come back and hear again about how things are going with emerging markets.
1 year is a big time.
Exactly.
Imagine last year, nothing happens elsewhere this year, we're talking about dialogue.
Exactly.
One is big time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.